Yeah, that's how she wrote. You ready to pray? Hopefully I didn't throw you off too much. Okay. God, we thank you for your love and your grace and your mercy. Touch our hearts, open our hearts, as we change by you. In Jesus' name we pray. And the church says, Amen. I pray quickly because I forgot one announcement. Okay, I want you to write down right now. If you knew without a doubt that God was going to answer one prayer, I want you to write that down real quick. One sentence, one prayer you'd ask God if you knew He'd answer it. One dream. If it's a person that you're praying about to come into your life, if it's deliverance, if it's whatever, if it's an attribute you're praying for, if it's a physical gift, whatever it is, I want you to write down this one thing. If you knew God was going to answer it, this is the thing. Okay. I want you to write down the 2 reasons why you think it won't happen. The 2 things you think, when you see this, you think, it won't happen because these 2 things. These things that come to my mind every time I think about it. It won't happen because of this and this. 2 doubts. Okay, so please excuse me for using a very similar title to something I've taught about a year ago. You don't remember, but I will, and YouTube will too, so I have to put a disclaimer. I taught a lesson a while back called Don't Negotiate. So if you want to call me out and say, you used this before, I already know. Okay, so we're already on the same page. I'm calling this lesson Negotiations. Okay? I'm using one story the same. So if you've heard this vaguely, if it feels vaguely familiar, just bear with me and pray that God moves in your life. So in Deuteronomy chapter 2, we see the Israelites leaving their 40 years of wandering. Actually, it was like 38 years and a 2-year descent. Anyways, they're about to cross over to the Jordan and go into the promised land and begin to fight. After 38 years of wandering, because they doubted that God could do it. Moses sits down and basically writes Deuteronomy as his final parting message. He's preaching a sermon. He's recapping their journey up to this point. And he goes through all the battles they fought up to the point that he begins to speak. God tells Moses and the Israelites as they begin to walk into the promised land, I want you to negotiate with these 2 people groups. Notice, he names who Moses is going to negotiate with. Specifically, he names who they will be. He says, I want you to not fight and take the land of Esau's descendants. Don't mess with Esau's descendants. I want you to negotiate and ask this of him. All I want, Esau, I don't want war. I just want water and food, and we'll pass on through. Goodwill to everybody. Well, it's interesting. He lets Esau keep his land, and we're going to get this later, but it's almost as if he's allowing Esau to keep his land because he is honoring, God is honoring Esau for what he could have been. Esau's the guy that sold his birthright. He could have been Jacob's counterpart. He could have been the guy that became Israel, the guy that God used to birth this whole nation, but he wasn't. He sold his birthright. He negotiated himself out of it. It's almost as if God is saying, I'm going to leave Esau and allow him to live off the remnant and the ashes and the embers of what he could have been. A fragment of a blessing, but I'm going to give him what little he has left. He tells him, I want you to negotiate with one other person. Lot's descendants, okay? Ammon and Moab were Lot's 2 sons. Negotiate with them. Don't take their land. Say the same thing. I just want water, just want food, just want to pass on through. That's all I want. God is honoring Lot, it seems like, based on who Lot was close to. Lot was the nephew of Abraham. Everybody know Abraham, the father of faith, the first guy that God said, you're going to be somebody. The guy that birthed the Israelites, the guy that talked to God and built this thing called a prayer life. Lot walked with Abraham. And so he had a relationship with somebody that had a relationship. And so it's almost as if Lot is being blessed because of someone he used to be close to. The ashes of who he used to be close to. Don't touch Lot's kids. The 3rd person Moses and the Israelites meet, God says, do not negotiate with them at all. Okay, no more negotiating. Now, roll up the sleeves. It's time to fight. King Sihon the Amorite, you're meant to take this guy out. He is evil. He is living in your inheritance. He's on your sofa in your house. It's time to take him out. But it's interesting that Moses sins. As soon as, I kid you not, the scripture says, do not negotiate, fight him. Moses in first person says, then I sent an ambassador to negotiate with Sihon. He said the same thing he said to Esau's descendants and Lot's descendants. All we want is food and water to pass on through. Well, obviously, God's not pleased with this. So God hardens the king Sihon's heart and forces Moses to have to go to war with him. Moses wins, they conquer it, and they get all of the land because it was already their land. And when it's all said and done, they win the victory. But when I was reading that, I was asking Moses and asking, life in general, why would any of us ever negotiate with something that God's already given us victory over? Why would we ever negotiate with something that God already says is yours? Why would you ever barter with something that God already says you have it? Why would you ever allow yourself to make peace with a weakness? To give up on a dream when God has already said it's already yours? Why would you do that? And I realized, well, maybe Moses was just an idiot. But he couldn't have been, right? The guy that had experienced all these moments with God. The guy that was there to part the Red Sea. What was he thinking? I think Moses got so used to negotiating when God said to negotiate that Moses had a hard time knowing how to fight and when to negotiate. Because he got so used with bartering with his discomfort and working issues out and learning how to live with them that when it came time to fight with something, he didn't quite know how to do it, so he thought, I'll just do what I've always done. This is why it's important to understand the seasons of life you're in. Because there are two different seasons. Ecclesiastes says it like this. There's a time to war and a time for peace. A time to fight and a time to rest. There's a time to sow and a time to reap. There's a time to feel confident and a time to be hungry. There's a time to die and a time to live. There's seasons for specific purposes. God told him to negotiate with these two people, and he was right. But God told him to fight in this season with this person, and he wanted to negotiate. Sometimes I think that we're in seasons where we think we're still supposed to negotiate, but God is saying, I've changed the purpose of your situation. Now I want you to fight it and overcome it and change and not learn how to live with it. Here's what happens. We have these fears, these doubts, these weaknesses. And there's several reasons why in certain situations God allows you to still deal with them. I have like 10 sermons about it. Like, you have a weakness, and God doesn't take it away. Well, he leaves it there to teach you how to depend upon him. And it makes you humble, it makes you hungry, it makes you learn how to pray. You ask God to speak, and he doesn't speak. Why would he do that? To teach you how to have faith without the validation of the voice splitting open heaven. There's several reasons why God would say, in your situation, negotiate with the Esau and the Lot. Learn how to be comfortable. The wall won't fall down, then maybe you should learn how to be content. There's many reasons why God would put you in a negotiation season. But every once in a while, you'll get in a season facing something, and God is saying fight, but you think negotiate. You're allowing yourself to become comfortable with it, and you're trying to learn how to live with it. Can I live with this fear? Can I live with these low expectations? Can I live with this addiction? Can I live with this wrong relationship? Should I learn how to work around it? Should I get comfortable? But here's what happens. First thing, if you're not sure what season you're in, this sermon is not quite for you. I have like 10 others. Selah, discontentment, hallelujah. These are for those where you know that God wants you to hit something head on and fight and overcome it. Now, if you're in the season where God says, I want you to look at it and get some deep inner truth, then that's all for you. But tonight, this lesson is for those where you know you're facing something and you know that you're supposed to fight through it, you just haven't yet. Here's the danger. First, you recognize what to negotiate with, what to have peace in, and what to square up and fight over. I used this illustration before, but bear with me. Once a year, Samuel, the young prophet, the only one that was anointed in that kingdom. Eli was his overhead. Eli had wicked sons. It was sinful and carnage. They were fornicating in the house of God. It was crazy. Only Samuel, the young man, had a heart for God. Every year, his mama would bring him a new coat. Bring him a new coat because he would outgrow his old coat. The old coat would get uncomfortable, and so every time he knew he was getting uncomfortable and with the coat he was wrapped in, every time he began to outgrow it, it would signify a transition into a bigger and better coat. See, sometimes we don't overcome situations. Sometimes we don't overcome things. We don't change and grow and have freedom and liberty. It's because we think that we're meant to learn how to be comfortable in this coat that's too small for us. We think we have to make peace with the anxiety, peace with the fear, peace with the failure. We think we have to grow comfortable even though it feels too small and agitated and frustrating. And so we're trying to learn how to live with this weakness when God says this is not the one. This is not your thorn in your flesh like Paul. This is not something to teach you how to depend upon me. This is the one you're supposed to fight and overcome. And two, sometimes you don't leave the old coat you're in, the old situation you're wrapped in, because you haven't outgrown it yet. You're getting uncomfortable. But see, your praise, your devotion, your passion, your hunger to change, when you get so restless that I can't deal with this anymore. I thought I was meant to deal with it, but God has told me now I can overcome it. I thought I was always going to live with it, but God is saying this is the one. This is not my Lot, and this is not my Esau I'm supposed to negotiate with. This is my Sihon, the one I'm meant to fight. When my devotion and my passion and my prayer life outgrows the situation that I'm in, it forces God to give me a bigger coat. Why? Because he hungers after your praise, your devotion, your love, and a relationship. And so whatever gives God more of your praise, devotion, and relationship, he'll do it. And so when you outgrow that coat, he has to give you a new one. But if you learn how to be comfortable with your enemy, then he won't give you a new coat. If you don't learn how to outgrow that coat with your passion, your prayer, he won't be forced to give you a new coat. And what happens is, you're sitting there outside of your promise, and another man is sitting in the stuff that God gave you, and you think it's okay. You're outside of your prayer life, outside of your relationship, outside of your confidence, outside of that blessing, that job, that career, and you think it's okay, but God is saying that's already yours. Why are you living outside of it? If you would just fight, there's no peace. Don't get comfortable. Don't work it out. Don't game plan it. The only level you want in your life right now is go. Press forth, fight for it, and overcome it. And when you do that, you make up your mind that this is, until this changes, I will give more than I ever thought I could give. I will outgrow. I will pray more than I thought I could in this life. I will fast more. I will read more. I will give more than I thought I could. Here's the thoughts that come to your mind. Well, if this changes, I'll give more. And if he puts this in my life, I'll do this. And if he gives me this opportunity, I'll do this. That you are negotiating yourself out of what God wants you to do. If you give now what you thought you only could give then will happen. If you give the prayer that you thought you only could give when he gives you that spouse, you will get that spouse. If you pray now when you feel like you have too little time for that ministry, he will give you that ministry. You must outgrow the coat. Real quickly, the two people he negotiated with, Esau's descendants and Lot's descendants. Esau was a hunter. Esau had the means to catch his own food. He was skilled in this. Bow and arrow. That's what he did. He could have been the guy that the birthright flowed through. Abraham was the first. Isaac was the second. Isaac was their daddy. Their promise was you're going to be the father of many nations. You're going to be blessed and you're going to have this walk in relationship with God that no one else will have. And whoever comes after you will have the same promise. It would have been Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. Esau could have become Israel. Esau could have been the guy that birthed Joseph. But one day Esau got so hungry. He was hunting all day. He got so hungry in a weak moment. He opened himself up to negotiate the terms of his future. See, the Bible prophesies, even before they were born, that the older will serve the younger, that Esau was going to give it up and serve Jacob. Because God looked down the timeline and knew that Esau was going to sacrifice everything that he could have been for what he wanted in that moment. Esau was hunting all day. He comes to the table and his hunger says, you're about to die. He says out of his own mouth to his brother, I'm about to die. He's so reckless. And he says, I got to have this stew or I'm going to perish. And his brother sees it and goes, he's weak. He's open to negotiations. I'll give you the stew if you give me your birthright. And so in a moment of weakness, in a moment of agitation, in a moment of temptation, in a moment of complacency, his adversary noticed that he was willing to barter with his future. See, when you get weak and you get scared and you get afraid and you get frightened and you get confused, the things around you that don't want you to be what God wants you to be, notice that there's an openness within you to compromise who you're going to be. Seize the chance. I'll show it here. I'll give you this. I'll do whatever it takes. If you'll give me what you will be for a moment of fulfillment. Esau gave Jacob his birthright for a bowl of stew. That makes no sense, does it? Like, that doesn't make an even trade. Like, why would that ever make sense? I'll give you my riches, my wealth, a relationship with God. I'll give you all of it for a bowl of stew. Notice that in the moment of temptation, confusion, and hunger, and fear, that it seemed justified to Esau to make that trade. You can't trust yourself in the moment of weakness. Because that moment of pleasure, that wrong relationship, that missed prayer time, lessening your dreams, lessening the calling because somebody said something discouraging to you, somebody said you wouldn't be good enough, lowering who you'll be in that one moment seems justified then. But later you'll realize that I was about to trade all of my birthright for just a bowl of stew. Here's what Esau did. Remember this. Esau traded who he was going to be for what he could be in the moment. Esau traded his future for what he could get now. He traded a future of purpose for momentary fulfillment. And yet we do this all the time. I've done it several times in my life. Where I barter what I can be with something I can have now. Do you realize when Esau ate that stew, he had the bow and arrow there with him? He could have went back out and hunted again. He didn't have to give it up. But he was so convinced he was going to die from hunger. He could have went back out and survived. He had the tools and the giftings that would have brought about his fulfillment and his potential. But yet he forgot that in the moment. He forgot that he could still make his dreams happen. He forgot that he could still overcome. I got a prayer meeting on Friday. I can make it. I got church on Sunday, I can make it. I can call somebody, I can tell my parents, I have accountability, I have a pastor in a church and a youth pastor, I got a prayer life, I can make it in my prayer closet tomorrow. I can make it if I just go back out one more time with my bow and my arrow and I don't give up who I am in this one moment. Esau had the potential to change, but he began to debate with his fear and his hunger. Don't debate with your fear and your hunger because you'll always lose. What will one moment do? It's just one moment. You begin to, are the consequences that bad? Will anybody ever know? Like, maybe God didn't say you were going to be that. Maybe He just thought you'd be something. Maybe the dreams are too big. Maybe they were too big. Maybe you've played this up in your mind. Maybe you don't pray enough. You don't fast. Maybe you should lower it. And there you go. You begin to trade your stew while you still have the bow and arrow in your hand. He traded his future for his present. And it's something that we're in danger of doing every day. Lot's descendants. I'm making good time. Lot's descendants, Abnon and Moab. Lot walked with Abraham. Abraham spoke to God verbally. Abraham had a miracle baby when his wife was ancient and he was ancient. What's supposed to happen? And boom, baby. Like, Abraham got to see sides of God nobody else did. Abraham's the first guy to call God Jehovah Jireh. Because Abraham was the first guy to see God be a provider. Can you imagine that? It's such a given for us now. But Abraham got to see the first time God said, I'll be your provider. Lot got to be near this man. And he got to experience blessings. Lot, if he'd have stayed with Abraham, he would have been part of God's people. He would have been great. He could have been grafted in. He could have been amazing. Should not have ate pizza before I'm tall. But he decided he wanted to live somewhere else and wanted to separate himself from Abraham. Here's what he did. He pitched his tent towards Sodom and Gomorrah. He's living with Abraham. He's living in the right place, the right situation. He has the right friends, prayer life, everything. But he puts the door of his tent towards Sodom and Gomorrah. So every day when he gets up, he looks out towards something he should not go towards. But it's amazing how when you begin to glance at it and look at it, how quickly you'll get there. See, when you angle your life, you don't want to do it. You don't want to date it. You don't want to compromise it. You don't want to give up on the dream. You don't want to listen to those doubts. But in a moment, you just kind of angle yourself and open the door. You just want to look at the doubts. I just want to look at them. What if it's not real? Okay. What if you thought this? I just want to ponder them just a little bit. Because I want to be honest, right? I don't want to be in la la land. I want to be realistic. That's what your mind says. You just open it towards that. And you think, I won't ever go there. But every day after every day, you don't realize that negotiations are taking place in your heart, your soul, and your mind. And every day it's dragging you closer and closer to Sodom and Gomorrah. And so you're being dragged there. Sodom and Gomorrah was the most sinful place on the planet. God is going to wipe it out in one moment. But Abraham prays that God would save Lot. And so God goes down with angels, sends angels, and saves Lot. Pulls him out. I mean, angels pulling this man out physically out of Sodom and Gomorrah. His daughters were hesitant. His son-in-laws thought he was crazy. His wife couldn't turn her eyes from it, so she loses her life. And they are out of Sodom and Gomorrah. He negotiated every day, and he got in a simple location. But God has pulled him out of it. He negotiated on what he would be, and so now all he has is a crushed and broken dream that he never thinks he'll live up to. But God has pulled him out of it. Pulled out of fear. Pulled out of brokenness. Pulled out of insecurity. He's on the precipice of restoration. He's free. Sodom and Gomorrah is gone. He has a decision to make. I can go back to Abraham, back to where I had it good. I can go back, or I can go up the mountain and hide because I'm afraid of the men of Zor, the men of the valley. I'm afraid. And so he begins to debate with his fear. I'm afraid they're going to kill me. I just had a city blow up behind me. I need to go up to the mountains and hide. But he could have went back to Abraham. And I asked myself, why did he not go back to Abraham? And then it dawned on me. Because before Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, long before, Lot was living in Sodom and Gomorrah, living in sin, living in complacency. Pick your poison. And an army came and fought Sodom and Gomorrah and wiped them out, took all the riches, and kidnapped Lot. Abraham hears about it and has to go rescue Lot. He rescues Lot, conquers that army. The king of Gomorrah, the king of Sihon, want to give him money and riches and everything. And right then, Lot has a decision to make. Obviously, I put myself in a bad city and bad things happen in that city. I put myself in a bad situation and bad things happen to me there. I put myself in vulnerability and I got snatched. I put myself in complacency and dreams died. I put myself in a bad situation and now I can change. I can go back with Abraham. But he doesn't. He doesn't go back with Abraham. Even though it's not safe where he is. He knows it's not safe. I just got attacked. So he goes back into Sodom and Gomorrah. Flashback to the present. It's destroyed. He's making a decision. I think the reason he didn't pick to go back with Abraham is because when you consciously decide to go back to Sodom and Gomorrah, it's hard to make the right decision the second time. When you consciously walk away from restoration and go back into fear, go back into lust, go back into relationships, go back and watch it, when you consciously are on the precipice of being free from those doubts and being free from that way you used to view yourself, but you debate and you allow yourself to go back into it, it's harder to say no the second time. And so the second chance he had to be restored, he wasn't thinking straight. Because every time God gives you the chance to overcome, but you negotiate yourself back into it, it's harder to leave the second and third and fourth and fifth time. Why? Because your trust in yourself and your trust in God's restoration takes a huge hit. Because you negotiated yourself back into bondage, back into fear, back into the strong situation. But because you did it, you forget that you did it. You think, well, God said he was going to save me. God said he was going to help me confidence. God said that if I prayed, it would happen. And you begin to blame God instead of blaming yourself. I've done it. I begin to blame God. Well, it's God's fault. Not that I consciously went back into it. God should have delivered me. He's like, I tried to deliver you 4 other times. And so you go back and you begin to blame God. And you begin. Here's what happens. When you're there, I can go back to Abraham. Can I trust myself? We've done this before. Deja vu. Like, why would anything change? Why would the prayer life work now? Why would the praise work now? What would my parents say? Why would it work now? And so you negotiate yourself back into it. Goes up the mountain. He's hiding. He's defensive. He's running scared. His daughters get him drunk. Now, some people say, Lot, who's a victim. Drunkenness was a sin in the Bible. They said they made him drink. He's a grown man. Here, have a drink, Dad. Has a drink, he gets drunk. When he gets drunk, they commit a vile sexual act and they conceive his sons that are also his grandsons. Those 2 sons are named Abner and Moab. They become the 2 people that Moses was told to negotiate with in our starting chapter. If he would have went back to Abraham, the seed of sin would have been born in his life. But because he went back a second time, because he negotiated himself back into a wrong position, things began to be born that were out of his control. And later on, Moab and Ammon and Esau's descendants, they're at peace now with Israel, but eventually they're going to fight them and take them out. They just get a little bit of land. Esau's descendants lost just a little bit. They get a momentary peace. Esau is blessed because who he could have been, just a vapor of what he could have been. He's living on shards of potential. And Lot is blessed because he was close to somebody that was close to somebody. He was close to a parent, close to a young person. He was just close to somebody that had enough Jesus on them that it got on him too. And so he's blessed because of who he used to be close to. But Moses and the Israelites, Jacob's descendants, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, on up to Jesus, the whole lineage was a lineage of men that would not negotiate, of women that would not negotiate. Rahab, Hagar, they would not negotiate. And so your salvation is about, are you willing to negotiate or not? Your dreams are about, are you willing to negotiate or not? Are you willing to break even, compromise? My fear takes some and I take some. But if you're not willing to negotiate when God says fight this, if you're willing to put up a fight and run through the wall and not have peace until you overcome it, be so restless, so hungry, and so God allows it to be changed, willing to do that, you'll get an eternal blessing. So the Israelites didn't realize that this temporary promised land they would have wasn't the true promised land that God had promised Abraham. He actually was foreshadowing heaven. Abraham is called the father of faith. And any of us, Gentiles that believe in Jesus Christ, that are born again, the Bible says we are grafted in. And that we are his true descendants. That it's not those that were just born physically to him. That it's really those that were born spiritually unto him. Those that follow God, trust in God, and obey God. And we inherit an eternity of promise. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Moses, on to Jesus, got to have this heritage because they didn't negotiate. These other men would have had the same heritage, but they negotiated. So real quick, look at your list one more time. Whatever the thing was, look at the two reasons why you think it would happen. Do you feel like you're negotiating? Do you feel like I'm breaking even? That I'm trying to make this realistic? If I knew that this was the time and God said, green light, fight for this. Don't live with it. Don't grow content with it. Look at those two things and decide if this is the thing that you're meant to fight for. Think about how will you feel if you never get it? How will you feel if it never happens? If you're laying on your deathbed and it didn't happen. Now take that feeling and wake up every day for the rest of your life and make that feeling happen inside of you until you get it. Because that's the feeling it's going to take for you to fight for your promised land. Break through those walls. You're going to have to fight until the season changes and God says, you've done well done, now you can rest. Okay? Stand.